right, but we start with the Senate, narrowly clearing two procedural hurdles, moving closer to a final vote on President Trump's DOJ budget cuts. Now, Congress must pass them by Friday, or the White House is going to have to spend $9 billion on programs it calls fraud and waste.
Joining us now is Texas Congressman and member of the DOJ House Subcommittee and House Budget Committee, Brandon Gill. On the latest, sir, thank you so much for joining us. The procedural vote ended in a tie, with Vice President J.D. Vance allowing the bill to make its way to the Senate for a vote this morning. Now, since the Senate restored $400 million to an African AIDS program known as PEPFAR, it'll have to go back to the House again. Do you see any problem getting it passed?
Well, thanks for having me on. I don't see a problem getting this passed. Remember, this is another instance of promises made and promises kept from President Trump. He's gathered the troops together, he called the play, and we're getting it done. Now, there's always some negotiations here. We started out with $9.4 billion. They clawed back a little bit of that in the Senate. But by and large, this is a big rescissions bill, and it's just the first that we're getting started with. We're still defunding NPR and PBS. We're still defunding large portions of USAID. This is a huge win for the president.
Yeah, Congressman, so three GOP senators, Susan Collins of Maine, former Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell, and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska all voted against this thing. It shocks me that Republicans are struggling to cut spending by $9 billion. That's less than 0.5% of the federal budget, and it barely snuck by in the House, barely sneaking by in the Senate. This should be a no-brainer.
You know, I couldn't agree more. Fiscal responsibility is historically the most ecumenical Republican policy. It's something that all Republicans, no matter which part of the conference you're from, should agree on. And what we're cutting here is deliberate waste, fraud, and abuse. These are virtual money laundering scams going oftentimes to left-wing organizations and left-wing media. This should be a slam dunk for Republicans. But it is a fight. But at the end of the day, we got it done, and that's what matters.
Sir, I want to talk about some of these cuts. They include money spent on transgender opera, $1 million for LGBTQ issues, $5 million for green transportation in Eurasia, nearly $900,000 for trans people, sex workers, and their clients in Nepal. Now, if you can't cut this, Congress will never cut spending.
You're exactly right. You know, we're starting with what should be the easiest rescission package that we're going to have. These are programs that are deliberately left-wing, that the majority of Americans, I think, find repulsive. You know, I think it's crazy to say that we're going to tax a working-class American in rural America, in middle America, and tell them that they're going to pay for transgender surgeries on the other side of the globe. That's insane. And that's something that is that most Republicans should agree with. You know, the American people agree with us here. So we need to get, this should just be the first step, but we need to get a lot more of these done.
Yeah, Congressman, and making this so easy, I mean, obviously Democrats oppose this. Jasmine Crockett from Texas went on a tirade yesterday about why Americans must spend their money on Sesame Street in Iraq. Take a listen.
When you start to talk about whether or not Sesame Street or anything else that's on NPR or PBS ends up in other places, this is so that there is not this warped thought process about the Western world or about the United States. We're talking about making sure that we don't end up allowing people to be radicalized against us because they have a terrible vision of us, because they may be in a government that actually puts out bad, terrible propaganda about us.
Have another telethon, give away another tote bag. I don't think we should be sponsoring Sesame Street in the U.S., let alone in Iraq. 30 seconds, Congressman.
Right. You know what gives people on the other side of the globe a warped view of the United States is that we're promoting left-wing causes that most people here find disgusting, much less people in more traditional societies across the globe. You know, the left wants this because it's a way of funneling tax dollars into their political movement at the expense of Republicans. This is purely partisan on their part to bolster their movement, their party, at the expense of taxpayers.
Great points. Congressman Brandon Gill, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this morning, sir.
Thank you.
Good to see you. All right, well, let's keep this conversation going and welcome in the host of the Tudor Dixon podcast, Tudor Dixon. So, Tudor, I mean, PEPFAR is widely viewed as one of the greatest legacies of President George W. Bush, the 43. Also one of the greatest acts of generosity in the U.S. in terms of global health. I'm not sure if this is going to be seen as a deal breaker or not, and maybe winding it down rather than just slashing it is a better way to end this program.
I don't think this is a deal breaker because, as you heard, there's going to be many more cuts that are being made, and that's what we need to be doing. I mean, this is a massive, the government is the biggest employer in the entire country. I mean, the government controls so many different things, and you now have Republicans who are on fire to make sure we are reducing that number, getting the